Hi, I'm Emily Swanson, and this is Dr. Ann Mook. Today, we are presenting our book chapter on food insecurity in the United States of America, a comparison between the Great Recession and COVID-19 pandemic.
So, what are the impacts of COVID-19 on food insecurity? Just looking at the numbers of 2020, and we know that these numbers have increased significantly over the past few months in 2021, we see that over 20 million people contracted COVID-19, according to the CDC, and more than 356,000 people lost their lives in 2020 alone. The economic ramifications of spread mitigation strategies caused severe economic crisis because many people in the industry, in restaurants, and education, etc., lost their jobs. And as a consequence, we saw a very rapid increase in food insecurity. Food insecurity is a major threat to public health, in particularly in children, because this leads to a variety of physical ailments, mental health problems, as well as developmental delays.
You may have seen images like this in the media recently, as food insecurity levels are on the rise, and Americans are needing to find alternatives to get to food and stay healthy and get access to healthful nutrition.
So we can compare this to the Great Recession, which was from December 2007 to June 2009 officially. The Great Recession resulted in the collapse of the U.S. housing bubble, which also led to a massive increase in employment. During the Great Recession, one of the main drivers of food insecurity was also that the prices of food increased. As you can see in the table, the prices of produce like bananas and tomatoes increased significantly, but also prices like bread, chicken, eggs were way more expensive than they were before. Um, so However, if we compare that to the COVID-19 crisis, we don't see such a massive increase in comparison. And some of the reasons behind this is that the oil prices plummeted, which is a major part of the cost of food production. However, as we will see in the next slide, many Americans experience food insecurities even years after the Great Recession.
Here is a chart of food insecurity rates among adults and children over time in the United States. In 2010, you can see that this was a very high time for food insecurity rates, almost 25% for children. And over time, it slowly decreased. And we're getting to relatively stable levels around 2018. And then there's a sharp increase in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. And as aforementioned, job loss and creating more of food insecurity rise in the United States generally.
So let's look into this job loss a little bit deeper. So when we compare unemployment percentages based on gender during the peak of the Great Recession and May 2020 during the COVID pandemic, one thing that is very notable is that during the Great Recession, most of the job loss was among males, as many of the jobs that were lost were, for example, in construction. Now, during the COVID pandemic, it's much more likely for women to lose their job as they are much more likely to work, for example, in restaurants, in the education sector, or in shopping malls, for example, that have been closed as a result of COVID-19. Another thing that we want to take into consideration too is that women are taking much greater responsibility for childcare. And if the children are not at school because school closed as a result of COVID-19, some women have to temporarily or permanently leave in order to take care of their children. Um, if we further look here in how unemployment is based on percentages for male and females based on race and ethnicity too, what we find is that what men are much less likely to lose their jobs in comparison to people of other races. Asian Americans are somewhat more likely to lose their jobs, but especially Hispanics and even more so for Blacks, these people are very vulnerable. If we look at Asian women in comparison to men, also they were much more likely to lose their jobs. While there are some compensation and mitigation strategies employed by the United States, for example, unemployment insurance, which was for the first few months 600 additional dollars per week, which helped a lot. However, during the summer, many Americans lost this additional unemployment insurance because Congress could not get to an agreement. Eventually, in the fall, they could get to an agreement, which was about 350 US dollars additionally per week, which is, of course, a lot lower than a regular salary would be if these people were employed in most cases. And in addition to that, there were a couple of mitigation strategies to help people who have to take care of children or maybe elderly parents, that they can take 2 weeks sick leave and an additional 12 weeks if they have to take care of someone. After that, they can um, continue this leave for 26 more weeks if they are willing to take a 30% pay cut.
So one other mitigation strategy that we will talk about is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. SNAP previously was known as the food stamp program that was established in 1939 during the Great Depression. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 increased these monthly benefits as a result of the Great Recession in trying to alleviate food insecurity in the United States. Similarly, in 2021, President Biden signed an executive order which increased SNAP benefits by 15% for all recipients. SNAP is a great resource for policy to decrease food insecurity levels in the United States. However, it alone is not enough because the rising food insecurity rates are resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic are also issues of eligibility with income limits, immigration status, and also just being aware about how to receive SNAP can be problematic in actually getting food to vulnerable populations at this time.
So for those people that either don't have enough access to food because SNAP benefits are not sufficient, or they don't have access to SNAP benefits, um, food banks are a great resource against food insecurity during COVID-19 and other times as well. Especially with many schools operating online, children are missing um, reduced cost or free meals that they otherwise would get. So this increases the prices for food for families. In addition to rising demand for food, unfortunately, food banks were under and are under a lot of pressure because of shortage of donations and also many volunteers that are not willing to work for the food banks in fear of contamination. Unfortunately, under the Trump administration, there was one um, program that helped, as some farmers did not directly supply restaurants anymore. They kind of tried to redirect this food to the Family Food Box program, which gave additional food for these households. However, the pressure is very significant. Feeding America, which is the umbrella organization for the food banks in the United States, predicted a 30% increase in demand in October 2020. That's a lot. That's 26 million pounds more food than usual.
Yes, it's also surprising when considering the amount of food waste America actually produces as well. So, in order to reduce food waste and reduce food insecurity, finding out strategies to use Farmers to Families Food Box program or other programs to redirect food from certain activities that are no longer needing it, such as tourism, it is very important to consider that to fight food insecurity. So, a couple of lessons from the Great Recession that we can learn and look at history and say, how can we better address food insecurity during and post a COVID-19 America? So, the US government implemented numerous policies to reduce poverty rates during the Great Recession. Um, we can really learn that implementing these in a appropriate time and also making sure there's no delays in extension to SNAP and delays in policies to get financial assistance to the people. Despite the unemployment insurance and tax benefits, food insecurity grew significantly among children. So, another lesson we can learn from that is making sure that, especially with children not being in schools, is to consider how we can get outreach of food to children. It took a decade to achieve pre-recession food insecurity rates. Hopefully, we don't have to take so long through learning from the Great Recession. And we do have estimations for student food insecurity rates already being higher in COVID-19 than during the Great Recession.
So, what are some of the mitigation strategies that the US government should consider? Well, one of the things is the expansion of the SNAP benefits, which is now higher and more easily accessible. This should continue for quite a while, probably until the rates of food insecurity diminish. Another thing is that we learned from the Great Recession is that we really have to anticipate long-term food insecurity rates and implement policies that are aware of this accordingly. Another thing that we really see is that women and racial minorities have been affected much more. This is a persistent problem that is not just the case um, during COVID-19 pandemic, but has been exacerbated during the pandemic. So we really need to address gender and racial inequalities. For example, offer equal educational opportunities, um, avoid any hiring or compensation discrimination, and offer things like childcare at affordable price for families so women can enter and continue to work in the workplace. Particular for single female-headed families, this is very important. Um, Another thing is unemployment insurance. We have seen that this has been helping significantly in reducing the um, need for food insecurity. However, um, during COVID-19, we have seen some significant gaps due political disagreement, and this should be maintained as highly as possible to make sure that families can weather this difficult circumstance. We should also extend farmers to family food box program and gradually decrease it as the demand also decreases. And we should evaluate what the retail sector can contribute to charitable food programs to reduce food waste. Emily will tell us about the last four policies as well.
Yes. So, in order to address the harder hit demographic of women who work in sectors that are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19, is having access to childcare. As we have mentioned, schools are either online or at reduced capacity. So, one of the parents, or if you're a single mother, you have to either find alternate childcare that can be expensive or miss work. So, in order to confront that, we should as a nation address this issue of getting affordable and quality childcare. Also, communication and when it comes to where to find food and where to get these resources is essential. If people do not know about certain programs or what they're eligible for, then they might miss out on these opportunities and take on unhealthy behaviors like missing meals, um, and also upscaling of governmental financial assistance, again, is that expansion of benefits and increasing and coming to decisions in a timely manner to get financial assistance in the hands of the people, and ultimately avoid delays in these extensions and having government assistance at appropriate times to ensure that people have finances to go out and buy healthy food and not be worried about when they can eat and what they can eat. So that I believe is everything we've covered. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our presentation. And hopefully, as the COVID-19 pandemic goes on, we will start to see some of these mitigation strategies implemented to reduce food insecurity levels in the United States.